Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I'd like to pick up with where we left off on Monday and first take a look here at jet stream level winds on the evening of Thursday. And again, we had the jet stream coming across the Pacific and then breaking, splitting into two pieces, a northern branch and a southern branch. What was interesting about this was that throughout the middle of this week, we had flow coming out of the north across the mountains in the west, and then it made this hard turn down here, returning for the first time in a very long time, flow out of the southwest. Now, you know we've talked a lot about that. A major missing component of the flow this year for California, for the southern plains, has been some sense of southwest jet stream flow, no subtropical jet. But we've kind of mimicked that here with this current system. That's been the one that's been able to draw that moisture in. But much of January, we did not see that. And just to give you another update here, this would be the January total precipitation ranks by climate district, actually including February 1st and 2nd in here as well. What you notice when you look at this is that we did have several places that were much drier than average. California, like the Central Valley here, getting down into the Mojave Desert. I mean, this is an area that just had its driest January on record. This is another region we've talked a lot about missing out on a lot of the snow coming through with the most recent events. And the upper Midwest has also been quite dry until this system, which just pulled through right in this area on Wednesday and Thursday. And we'll show you that in a second. The southern plains, though, continue to have their drought issues. And what I'd like to do, just thinking about this and kind of building on what we talked about on Monday, is let's see where this possibly is going to go. So I've been thinking a lot this week about La Niña because the latest ocean temperature pattern here continue to show that the La Niña is certainly fading and continuing to fade out here in this part of the Pacific. In fact, just looking out there, these are Niña region 3.4 temperatures, ocean temperatures. And since, the beginning of January, they've slowly and steadily climbed up here. They're actually back close to what we would call INSO-neutral territory. Now, again, that area is this spot that's right over here, okay? And sorry, let's get the other tool out there. There we go. This spot right in through here where we started to see those ocean temperatures rebound. But we have two other things to think about. It's the ocean temperatures here and also what's going on right now with this La Niña being more east focused. And that's what I want to keep my attention on. Monday, the discussion is going to go here, because we're going to have over the weekend released to us the brand new long-range European forecast, which will go out 7 months. We're going to take a look at that, and we're going to focus a lot on these ocean temperatures along the west coast of North America. But for now, let's come back to this La Niña. All right. So we've got data going back to 1950 on every El Nino and La Niña event, and each spike up on this graphic is an El Nino event, and each spike down is a La Niña. You'll notice that most La Niñas come in pairs. They tend to have two different La Niñas that occur here, kind of one following the other. So you have one in one winter, and then there's another one in the subsequent winter. Now, I looked at this and I said, well, let's just go back to the 70s and pull out every La Niña event that was fading going into late winter and spring, which is normal for them. And let's start to do a little bit of kind of constructing the former atmosphere when this has happened. And this is the first thing that I'd like to show you. January. So we just finished January. It is common to be that dry in California, in Texas. And most of January was very dry right into this area, into the upper Midwest as well. It's a bit more common to see more active weather in through this corridor, and we certainly saw that. I mean, how many times through Tennessee and Kentucky did we get those winter storms this past January? And many of them come over to the East Coast as well. But dry along the south and southeast, this is quite common when there is a La Niña, and the Pacific Northwest tends to do a bit better. So I look at all of that and I just come back and say, okay, this is what we had. To be honest, this La Niña we're currently going through kind of matches it. And the pattern that gets us there, let's blow this up a little bit so you can see it, is one where we have a ridge somewhere here in the Gulf of Alaska, and the flow is doing like this. Now, we've talked about that a lot, right? The coldest air anchored here over the Canadian prairie, a lot of northwest flow, which then curls here into the North Atlantic. Now, that's those composite years for January. This past January was much more amplified, and the ridge, rather than sitting here, was closer to the U.S. coast. And we blame that a lot throughout the month of January on the position and strength of the Madden-Julian oscillation. But I'll just show you something here before we get into this. We had several regions across the planet where we had big high over low blocks where the flow is forced to do something like this. And we talked about that on Monday. And that's what kept this trough pretty well anchored here, and flow coming out of the northwest, which is dry, curling in and heading off to the east coast. Now, the net effect of all of this is when we got the latest drought monitor today, We see now that we have seen some expansion of the drought. We can look at this a couple different ways. I like to look at the change maps. We'll do that very quickly here. We're just going to see that let's try that again. There we go. What we're going to see is that going back over the last 3 months, we've still got expansive drought that's in the southern plains. A lot of this will be going away with the recent precipitation that just came through, but we didn't get this precip here up into Wisconsin, a little corridor in there in southern Wisconsin, not little, a large area that's still quite dry. But I want to do one other thing now, and let's go over to data and look at time series. What we're going to see here is this across the whole United States, how much area we have in drought. So you can see these past peaks since the year 2000 when this began. And here's, for example, the 2012 drought, middle of 2012. Well, we're right now at the beginning of a year, and if you just come down here and let this hover, you can see that we're currently sitting at about 72% of the country covered in some form of drought. And the big questions we're going to keep asking is, are we going to see any improvement, any changes in any of that as we stretch this out? So thinking about that, we did just add some snow to this. A lot of very heavy snow here on the front range of the Rockies, pushing up into the very high plains. A corridor in through here where we locally had some heavier snows in the range of 2 to 6+ inches, but the main action was right in through here. Now this map is only valid through 6 a.m. on Thursday, so of course we've added a lot more in through this area since this map was made, and we'll get that new update tomorrow morning. But a wide swath in here between 6 and 15 inches of snow rolling right in through this area. So that returned some moisture to some places that needed it. All right. But I'm thinking about this in terms of total liquid content when it all melts. And this was great. This is an area that needed to pick up some more precipitation. So to be able to see that area picking up that precipitation is a big net positive overall. But you notice that back here, this was an area where we were drier. And the amount of moisture that's in that snow is not much. So the drought that's still in this part of the country is going to continue. And now look, we've missed this whole drought area and the west, of course, with no subtropical jet stream flow. So snow, I did get an update this morning and I added it to the map, and there's the biggest changes that are happening right in through here. So we've filled in some of our snow hole, and this area in through here is getting filled in kind of as we go on through the evening this evening. But this is an area, look at that, where we've not seen much. And right in through here, that's an area that needs more snow. New England does as well. Take a look. When you look compared to average, these are where we have the deficits. They're shown very clearly here in red. So a lot needs to be kind of corrected before we go into spring. So that's what I wanted to get to. February and March, those same La Niña years where things tend to fade, we go back to neutral, the ridge tends to move in this direction. Okay? Now, this past month, it was here. Can we figure out a pattern that sets up to move that ridge in this direction toward the Aleutian Islands? Because if that occurs, the flow comes like this. Better precip for California, especially Northern California. Some sense of ridging over the southeast gets the jet stream to curl up like that, and it's very active. That tends to be a very wet February and March for much of the country. Now, here's the other piece of this. When looking at the MJO, in those February to Marches with fading La Niñas, the MJO like to hang out right here a lot. Now that would be phases 4, 5, 6, that general area. 7 and 8 are over here, and the other phases 1, 2, 3, they're all over here in the Indian Ocean. But when you look at this in terms of anomalies, you see that the MJO did actually prefer a little bit farther to the west position. And that's what I want to stress right now. This is the reason. Once this resets, you're going to see here that currently very strong trade winds are present here in the just north of the equator across the Pacific. And what happens is the nose of them kind of slows down right in this area. And what's over here? Phase 3 of the MJO. You can see it for the next 15 days, beginning today all the way through mid-February. The MJO, the greatest velocity potentials, are sitting over that phase 3. And the models have picked up on it well. In fact, now not only just popping out into phase 3, but even coming here a bit further into the Indian Ocean before they start to curl around over into phase 4. Now let me just put the whole story together for you. Phase 3 of the MJO favors a westward retreat of the ridge. And that would be absolutely critical to returning better moisture to the Pacific Northwest, into California. When I say we're doing this without the subtropical jet, and keeping things active, possibly dipping that jet stream down into Texas, rolling it up over this ridge in the southeast, and then having it exit out here into this blocked setup in the Pacific. It's blocked because there's a high over Greenland and a low over kind of the central Atlantic, excuse me. Now, if I dial up this pattern, I mean, this would be a great February, a great even March outlook. So we got to ask if our models are even picking up on that. NOAA released their outlook on the 31st, and you can see they're still quite active into this area. But one thing they've peeled back on is the risk of getting really dry here. They've now moved that quite a bit farther back to California because they're still missing the subtropical component of the jet. But if we do get the jet stream to come around like this and then dip through here and run up through the Ohio Valley, that would indicate better moisture for those regions. The models are very aggressive on being above average in terms of temperatures east as well. This is at least what NOAA has. I think they're following quite closely to what the CFSV2 shows. So this would be week 3, February 17th through the 23rd. They've got very active conditions here. Basically, the flow is coming over the top, diving down, and then ejecting. So they're going to keep that pattern around through possibly the middle of the month. But they're all trying to get that ridge, which at this point, middle of the month is still sitting here, and move it. See, this is by the end of February getting it there. So the jet stream goes over it here, dives down into the northwest, and then ejects, keeping much of the Midwest quite wet. In both scenarios, it does not appear that we could be overly aggressive on forecasting the precipitation for Texas. It's the wrong setup. No good southwest flow, no subtropical jet. But I believe that's what NOAA is basing its forecast off of. Well, you know, I record these late in the afternoon because I'd like to show you the new European outlook. It goes a little farther. We're going to go from February 20th out to March 21st. And we're going to do that so we can see if this area has expanded, what we've done to the Pacific Northwest, California, and then Texas. Those are the areas, right? So when I look at this, compared to the previous run, California is less dry. Back that ridge up and we can really get improvements here. MJO Phase 3, this is going to be quite wet. Better clippers coming through the northern plains. We could fill in some of that snow hole that's here. And then all these systems make the turn, keeping the Ohio River Valley, the mid-Mississippi River Valley, the eastern Great Lakes, and in New England very active. I believe the models are a little overdone on the dryness in the southeast, but this is always the area that's going to very much concern me. That's the southern plains and drought expansion. I'm excited to see the updates this weekend on the long range to see if that's going to hold beyond this spring. We're going to get a good idea about that. So that's what I got for you in terms of the latest on the long range. Let's now talk about what we've got going on near term. First and most important thing is, at least in my opinion, the polar vortex is near record strength. Now, just to show you the difference between right now, which is what you're looking at, and the polar vortex, and what we were enduring a year ago right now, this is what the polar vortex looked like last year. Completely split into two pieces by this big feature here in the stratosphere. And you can see the setup right like that, just sending that cold air in the troposphere all the way down here to the Gulf of Mexico. So again, this was a year ago right now. This is today. Polar vortex is strong. So all the cold air that's coming in behind this is not linked to deep, deep Arctic air, although it is quite cold. We still have a large area as of 5 o'clock this evening that are under winter storm warnings. We've got severe thunderstorms here over parts of Alabama, flood watches north of that, and a substantial part of the mid and lower Mississippi River Valley into the Ohio River Valley that's under an ice storm. So now we need to transition and start talking about this near term. So let's first go to the severe weather side of it. The Storm Prediction Center's had this area kind of under risk all day today. And just looking here at some of the most recent radar data, let's let this play out. I'll go back to the overnight hours last night. You can see, look at the moisture getting drawn in here, destabilized atmosphere, front rips through there, and now you can start to see the severe storms that have lit up on that area. This is the setup in the low levels of the atmosphere. Remember that deformation zone we talked about? So the flow trying to do something like this on the backside coming in like that, and that's that elongated front on which we've seen severe weather in terms of winter weather from Texas all the way to Maine. What an impressive system. Our latest high-res models from this afternoon. Now let's get this up queued up to about 6 o'clock when I'm recording here. There we go. We've seen ice all day today right in through this area. Some places picking up in excess of a half of an inch of ice. That's a tremendous amount of ice. But the forecast as we play this forward, watch those pinks. You see that it spreads that ice corridor through the overnight hours all through this region here. There'll still be quite a bit of snow on the backside, still left over for Indiana late this afternoon and this evening into Ohio, and then here into parts of New England. And as we play this forward, we see that through early morning Friday, getting into Friday midday, Friday afternoon, this is kind of the last big push of this system into New England. Scattered showers and some embedded thunderstorms in the southeast. Little clipper comes through Wisconsin, spreading a little bit of light snow. But the first system that we've been talking about all week, by the time we get to Saturday morning, is finally off the coast and higher pressures in behind it. There's a little clipper running right here along the border that will show up on Saturday morning. And by the time we get to Saturday afternoon and evening, it does spread some light snow over the Great Lakes with a little bit of snow showers coming here into the Dakotas again. But that's what we get from our high-res models. Let's just take a look at what the European model is suggesting for the total amount of precipitation over parts of the southeast. So I've started building a new suite of maps here with some numbers on it so you can see, match them up better with the color bar. There's the potential, and you can see now why they have that flood risk out for this area. There's the potential for these storms as they're rolling through tonight and overnight hours tonight for dropping an inch, inch and a half, up to 2 inches of total precipitation. But from there, let's just now talk about that ice. Because looking at the probability of additional ice accumulation, so all day it was in through here. As we look over the next couple of days, it's starting to move into parts of Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, into New England. This is the probability of getting 1/10 of an inch of ice. Whoa, didn't mean to zoom in that far. But you see that there's some pretty high probabilities right in through this area. All right, multi-model analysis. Let's see what happens after this system rolls through. So we've already seen both models, or excuse me, the NAM, now both models here, the GFS and the European, take us out till that system goes through and the little clipper arrives over the Great Lakes. So we've got it this far. After that, you know what the flow ends up doing again? See the high pressure cell here? This tells you the story. Flow's doing this. We have little clippers that run off here sometimes, but a lot of convergence and therefore drier. We could get early next week some leftover rain here in parts of the Carolinas down to Georgia. And then there's a little attempt at a frontal passage here on a coastal low that could come through Florida. But other than that, it's clippers running through the Canadian prairie. This is out next Tuesday into Wednesday, out there into Thursday. See another clipper coming down into the GFS a little bit later here in the European. Could get some good lake effect snow out of this. But we go over to a much less dramatic pattern than what we just saw. As we get all the way out there to Friday about the 10th or 11th, okay, we could have another system roll through, but we need to ask what happens after this. Before I get there, though, let's at least look at the snowfall totals. This is what we're expecting here just as the system exits into the northeast. This is the European model, the 12Z run. Got the numbers on there to kind of help you see how much snow we could get out of this as we finish up this first system. But as we look overall, as we said, the next 10 days, because of that ridge, we're dry here in California to the Pacific Northwest. Little clippers try to roll through, but this whole region, after this system goes past, shows up drier to the west of that zigzag line I just drew here. It'll be drier in New England, too, once this system passes through. So how long does that last? Well, we've been questioning at the beginning, does the ridge actually move back toward the Aleutian Islands? By day 10, this is what the flow pattern's doing. A lot of convergence here. Systems stay south of this trough. But as we go out there to day 11, 12, 13, so we're out here now to Valentine's Day. This is Valentine's night. See the ridge staying in the Gulf of Alaska? Watch. As we go to the 15th into the 16th, it does start to migrate a little bit west. Not all the way over to the Aleutian Islands like we want, but you see what that does? That allows now for some troughs to come in through here, suggesting that maybe on like the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, somewhere in that time frame, we're going to watch for a few of these to race out here and give us another shot at bringing in some heavy precip into this section of the country. Now, this is a pattern. I'm just taking the pattern and giving that forecast. The model hasn't caught up to it yet. It's got the dryness west because of the ridge at the beginning of week 2. But if we do dip that trough into this area, this showing up dry for week 2, most of this will be early in week 2 because it appears that once we get out to about, like I said, 15th, 16th, 17th, that's when the pattern's going to shift around and really change up for us. Okay, let's talk temperatures and we'll wrap this one up. Today was quite cold in Texas. Teens getting down to Texas and Oklahoma. The warmth that's over the east, well, it's got another day on Friday before we push it out and bring in that colder air. Already, though, by Saturday, we're bringing in 50s into parts of Nebraska, 40s into South Dakota. And what we're going to see here is that on Sunday, another quick shot at some cold air in the upper Midwest. But watch this. Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, mild west, mild here. And the models have been picking up on that pattern for a while. Day 5 through 10 shows us where that ridge is going to be. Again, until that ridge breaks down, this is what we got. So there's cooler air here, but warmth coming off the mountains. Okay, downslope flow. It may break down though once that ridge finally starts to move. So the flow doing something a bit more like that. Now we see some cooler air that's in place here. And that looks all the way out there to day 15, which is about the time we're watching for those systems to maybe crank up in the plains and go across the Midwest. All right, one last thing to talk about, and we'll wrap it all up here. I'm going to give you a quick international perspective. Now, we got a whole video coming out about South America, so we'll get to that in a second. Australia did go over to a drier forecast in the next 10 days. Much of Western Europe is drier, but look at Eastern Europe here in the Russian wheat belt. We are seeing above average precip. And that same area is quite mild right now compared to the eastern half of North America, which has seen big shots at some cooler air. So let's keep an eye on all of this, and I'll monitor it over the weekend. And again, next week when we've got our new long-range data that came out, I'll be highlighting a lot of that early on Monday. Thanks for listening today. We'll talk to you again after the weekend. Thank you.